I was working in this little grocery store in Indianapolis for a guy named Ryan. He was a Jew. And he pretty well gave me the run of the store. I ran the cash register, I did the delivery, I did the stocking, and we sold, mostly it was a black neighborhood. But one day this family moved across the street from the from the store, and her dad, John, started coming in. And John, of course, would nip the bottle a little bit, and we had beer and wine in the store, and he would buy it and talk to me, and I'd talk to him.
A lot of time there.
And then he says, I got a daughter over next door. So two of my daughters married. I got one's not married, and he's jokingly about how he's going to marry her off. And so anyway, 2 or 3 days later, well, I asked him. I said, well, who is she? And he showed me. He said, that's my daughter-in-law. She's sitting on the porch. I said, well, maybe I could take her out some night. He said, well, ask her. So anyway, one day she come running in the store, and I said to her, hey, I said, how about let's go and, I don't remember where now, we was going to go somewhere. And she said, well, you'll have to ask my dad. I said, I've already asked him. He says, okay. And you ought to see the look on her face. That time I had a driver's license. I was 17 years old. And we went to see Lady and the Tramp. And I drove out on Shadeland Avenue in Indianapolis. There's a drive-in theater there. So we went there. That was the start, until she ditched me one time. I don't know. Yeah, I had to go to Japan. I went and joined the Air Force, went to Japan, and then she chased me all the way to Japan, buddy. I got this letter one day in the mail.
I didn't ditch him. I just was being friendly with the guy that I'd known most of my life. And I didn't know he was watching me.
I wasn't watching you. I went by one night to see you, and he told me you weren't there. And he told me that he was your date. That's what he told me. He said, I don't know who the guy was. And I said, well, hey, if she wants to date you, let her date you. I can find somebody else. So I left. But in Japan, she called me. And I wrote her a letter back. And the next thing I knew, we was writing letters. And the next thing I knew, I was coming home from the Air Force. And when I got to my house, she was waiting on me. Well, and that was, then a lot of things happened.
Well, to start with, me and Stella, his sister, was good friends, and that's how I met him. And she was the one taught me into going out with him. And then when he was overseas, I ran around with Stella all the time. And then he came home, and we got married.
I met you long before you ever met Stella.
No.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I took you to the house and you met Stella. And she probably jumped on the bandwagon. Stella did probably, knowing her.
Well, we were at a drive-in theater, and we sitting there. The movie was kind of. And after a while, he said, when are you going to marry me? And we'd been dating for about a year more, well, more than that. And I said, whenever you get enough nerve to ask me, I guess.
And I didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything? You said, really? And I said, yeah. And he didn't say anything. And I said, well, was that a proposal? If it is, and that's all I'm going to get, I'll say yes. And the rest is history.
Well, tell us about the wedding. When did you get married?
He was real bashful. He's real shy. And so I kept saying, he won't go for a church wedding. I wanted one. So he did, and everything went real good, the wedding. And then he was in the Air Force. And after that, we went to back to the Army base. We lived in
Air Force Base.
Air Force Base in Michigan, and we had a lot of fun there, and a lot of good friends. And he was there until his time was up, and then we went back to Indianapolis, and that was the only time I didn't work, and I hadn't worked in a long time, so I was getting nervous. So we went back to Indianapolis, and I got a job. I went back to the phone company. I'd worked there all those years, and then Becky came along, and then you,
No, Greg.
Greg,
We try to forget about him.
yeah, and then you were
He wasn't
He's-
born until we got to Chattanooga going
No.
to Bessie Temple.
yeah, and
He
in the
was
meantime-
born to that old hillbilly place.
Yeah, you used to fuss about that because anyway, we went to Tennessee Temple. You were about 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, and you were
I was
Now,
born in
wait a
Chattanooga.
minute.
you were born down there, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. See, he was born.
And he was the church baby, and it was a big church, and he was passed around all the time. And if I wanted a break, all I had to do was let somebody take him home, because somebody was always wanting to take him home. And he enjoyed the attention he was getting. I'm not sure the other two enjoyed his attention though. So, well, Greg never wanted
Did you put
attention, but Becky did. So that was the beginning. He took over.
Can I talk about Greg putting a button up his nose in Chattanooga? Can I talk about Greg almost cutting his finger off with a little wagon I bought him? Nah, we won't talk about Greg. Wait till Mike leaves, we'll talk about Mike. Well, the Lord called me to preach. And in 1965, in June of that year, or July 1, we loaded up a Volkswagen, everything we owned on it, 2 kids. We looked like the Beverly Hillbillies.
Everything we owned.
I had $450 in my pocket from the stuff that we had sold, furniture and things like that. And we headed for Chattanooga, Tennessee. We didn't know where we was going to stay. We didn't know what we was going to do. So I got to Chattanooga. First night we stayed in a motel. The next day at school, I met this fellow who was out of our church in Indianapolis, and he let us move in with him for about 3 weeks till we found a place to move. We rented a house trailer, and had 2 bedrooms. Had no man to own it. Nobody could ever understand what he said, because everything he said sounded like 3 bags. Yes, sir, he said. It sounded like, yes, sir, 3 bags full.
But you kids enjoyed talking to him.
Well, Becky especially. And in that trailer park, Becky found a snake, and Rella heard her saying, "Rockabye baby," and Becky had that snake by the tail going, "Rockabye baby."
Only she was not in tune.
Yeah, huh?
I said only she was in tune.
You keep quiet. Well, you got black that other eye, you mess with me. Anyway.
Get to that eye.
Anyway, I found a job at Buster Brown and worked there for about a year. And then the school, I had some electric training from Indianapolis when I worked at Fairmont Glass in Indianapolis. And so the school asked me to come work for them. And I went to work for the school. For the next 3 years, I worked for the school. And during that time, which was 4 years we were there, we pastored a church up in Palmer, Tennessee. We're nothing but an old coal mining town. We had a church that people would come to, and on one side they called them the Scabs, the other side the Union people said. And the twain had not met in years. And because the coal mine strike had been going on for years. And then we pastored the Rock of Ages Baptist Church up in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. And then we worked with Cecil Bateman at the church up on W Road. And a lot of exciting things happened there, because he had 2 daughters that were mean as snakes, and I had a daughter about as mean as a snake. And so
Mike had a great big crush on the oldest daughter.
yeah, Jeannie, he had a great crush on Jeannie. Anyway,
She was 18 and he was 1.
I finally graduated, and shortly after I graduated, we moved back to Indianapolis I spent a period of 9 months in Indianapolis before the Lord gave me a church. Well, I was at Tops of the Road working with Brother Julian for about 9 months after graduating, and I was candidating to a few different churches, and none of them seemed to want me. And I really didn't want them either, so it was kind of a mutual thing. And so we received this letter, Brother Julian did, from a group up in Illinois, and who knew missionary Bill James, who was missionary in Japan. He recommended me to them, and they were a group of people that started a church. About 20, 25 of them we got together, 3 or 4 families that started a church. And they asked me to come. Well, they sent me an invitation, and it was too close to Chicago for me, because I told the Lord we'd go anywhere but Chicago. I wasn't going to Chicago. But anyway, Brother Julian had me in his office, and Jack Hudson was there holding a revival meeting. And Brother Julian said, fill an application out and send it back to them. It won't hurt nothing. He said, and if they have you to come up there, you and your wife can go make it a vacation. And I said, okay. But I said, I don't want to fill that questionnaire out. I don't know how to fill that questionnaire out. Jack Hudson said, I will. I'll fill it out for you. And so one of the questions they had on there, really, this is true, one of the questions they had on the questionnaire is, what does your wife wear to bed? Now that was on the questionnaire. Jack Hudson, here's his answer. He says, nothing, if I can talk her into it. And he'd answer all kinds of silly answers. You know,
What does your wife look like instead of a movie star?
Yeah, and to this day, nobody has ever asked me about that questionnaire. Nobody, I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't know if anybody read it, never got back to it.
He never did any of it. Brother Julian and
yeah, Brother Julian and Jack Hudson did
Jack Hudson did it, the whole thing.
So anyway, I went up there. We were going to take a vacation. We got some people to keep the kids and youth reach children, and then we went up there, and supposedly just to make it a vacation, go up there and have a place to preach and so forth.
Robbie kept the kids.
But anyway, as soon as I got to Phillips Park on the hill right above Aurora, you know where Phillips Park is, I stopped there to make a telephone call to call the fellow who, back in those days we didn't have cell phones, so I had to stop at a telephone booth. And I was going to call the fellow. I was calling the fellow that whose phone number and address I had, who was Jim Johnson. And but as I'm making that phone call, it just came to me, this is where you're going to be. I mean, God just told me, said, this is it. Here you are. And I knew as sure as I'm standing there that was the place that the Lord wanted me. So anyway, I preached Sunday morning, Sunday night for the people, stayed with Jim Johnson, and preached Sunday morning, Sunday night, taught Sunday school class, and answered all their questions and everything. And they had a lot of silly questions. One of the questions the guy asked me was, well, what would it take, talk about salary? He said, what would it take for you to be able to get by on? And he was a truck driver. And Sonny Manica was his name. And I said to Sonny, I said, listen, would you work where you work at for what you get by on? He said, kind of a stupid question, ain't it? I said, that's kind of it that way. But anyway, I told him I would not discuss salary with them until they called me. After they had voted on me and called me, then we talked about salary. And when we left that night, going back to Indianapolis, because I had to work Monday, Rella says, you reckon they'll call us? And I told her on the way back, I said, if they don't call us, they are out of the will of God. because that's where God wants me. And they called me. We discussed salary when I went back, and they gave me $150. It was $150 $150 a week, which was very good money back then. You know, it surprised me they gave me that much money. And they bought a house in Boulder Hill, moved us in, and like in 2 or 3 weeks I was there, you know, after I had preached for them. And so, of course, we had the first battle on the first Sunday we preached over mixed bathing and things of that nature. But God blessed us, and we stayed there for 32 years.